how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the We Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I'm your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. So today we are talking about Legion. The premise on IMDb states David Haller is a troubled young man diagnosed as a schizophrenic, but after a strange encounter, he discovers special powers that will change his life forever. Pretty solid. If you've never seen Legion, it is a crazy show, but in a good way. So let me just say, trigger warning at the top for anyone who needs it. Also, if you're going to watch this show, if you've never seen it before, and you are epileptic, I can't say it, but you know what I mean. If you have that, then I recommend avoiding this show. A lot of flashing lights in this show. But anyways, if it's the first time here, I go through the plot beat by beat. That way, you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. We start off with a forest shot, and then it is like transitioned into a baby, and he's kind of turning into a kid. Everything seems to be like pretty, normal until he starts to getting around, I don't know, probably like 10 or 12 type age, or, like that preteen. And that's where we see him in like a science class setting a fire, and he's like kind of laughing about it. We see him a bunch of people coming around him and kind of like screaming at him for whatever reason. He's older, like an older teen. He's outside of a store drinking, and it seems like chaos is happening behind him, so it's like not clear what's going on. It kind of transitions into him being in a police car, and he's just kind of like, laughing and shaking his head around, and we see the police car windows explode. He is given pills inside of a mental hospital, and they're like, these will kind of help you out. We see him turning into adult, and this is all like really fast. This is like in a 10-15 second clip. So it's all just coming by you. I'm slowing it down, but it's all just whizzing by. And as he's an adult, he hangs himself. And we instantly cut to happy birthday, and it is him. It is David's sister on one side and David on the other side of when you go to visit someone in jail, but there's no like glass there for this one. She goes to hand him the cupcake, and he's like, I can't, like they won't let me have that. And she goes, oh. And it turns out he has been in a psych ward for a while. He says something like he's been, kind of counting the days, and it's been like 230 something Tuesdays. So he's been there for a good amount of time. She's asking if he sees stuff anymore. He's like, no, I don't see stuff anymore. And then it shows that he still clearly sees stuff. He sees like two old people in the corner just laughing for no reason. And he's like, yeah, when can I come home and get out of here? And she's like, well, whenever the doctor, lets you go, then you can kind of go home. And it is interrupted by it being time for him to have his pills. So he goes back into the ward. David is in a wheelchair, and the music starts to kick up, and there's like flashing scenes, and it's just like this huge sense of anxiety of like, what the hell is going on here? And this is pretty much like the whole show. It's just like, what the fuck is going on here? But in a good way. But we continue. So things are going crazy. David is wheeled next to Aubrey Plaza, who's playing Lenny, who seems to be his friend. There's a guy across from them who is drooling and just seems like he's not even there, like mentally. And she's kind of guessing, like, oh, why is he like that? You think it's this drug? You think it's that drug? Maybe a mixture of things. And in the background, we see this really cute girl. David is immediately smitten by her. He has a crush. David's like, yo, let me see your Twizzlers. And goes over to talk to her. He bumps into her, and she freaks out. And she's like, you're too close to me. And then, like, walks away. And he's like, ah, damn it. So oh, man. Yeah, so we go to David, and he's having a conversation with his psychiatrist, I think. Oh, no. Okay, this is a mixture of, like, him talking to someone and then also being in bed. I should have made these notes more clear, but again, this is the same experience as watching the show. So someone asks him how he's feeling, and we see these flashing lights. He mentions devil with the yellow eyes. And during this time, David's bed starts to float, and then it crashes back down. And of course, the orderlies think that he's, acting up. So they come in and they like push him against the wall, and he's like, no, like, you don't understand. They hit him with a needle, and they put him to sleep. We go to a therapy circle, Just kind of talking to David about how he's feeling, and the other ones are just kind of like sitting there. The new girl shows up, and there's this interesting thing of like when she is sitting down, the sun is just like beaming behind her. So sometimes when she's talking, you can't even see her. So it's this weird, I can't think of the word, but it's almost like a representation of like she feels like this brand new, like sparkling, interesting thing for David. But at the same time, during the conversation, which we'll get into, it's like she is enlightened in a way that everyone else in the circle is not, because they're kind of behind this like plaid generic wallpaper, and she's just covered in light. And basically she's like, I think all of this is bullshit. She is saying like, hey, all of this weird stuff that makes normal people want to put us in here is just the things that make us stand out, and it's kind of just like who we are, and we should embrace that. And David thinks that's awesome. He's like, you want to be my girlfriend? Right in the middle of the circle. And she's like, yeah, okay, but you can't touch me. And he's like, all right, that's fine. And she's like, okay, cool, find me a dinner. So we get some montage of the two of them dating. They're eating lunch. They're getting to know each other. She doesn't like being touched, so they're like holding two ends of a scarf, but then walking like they're holding hands. It's really cute. If they wanted to, he would, type stuff. And there's this intimate scene of them just standing next to each other, dreaming about being outside. She's like, if you kind of like squint your eyes and then look at the road outside, it's almost like, yeah, you're in here, but you kind of see yourself outside at the same time. And David gets really close, and she's like, oh, like, don't kiss me. And he's like, no, like, just kind of like use our reflections to pretend like we're kissing. It's kind of cute. We do a hard cut to David in a room kind of with this officer, and he's like, yeah, so how long has she been missing? And David's like, no, she's not missing, Sydney. This is where we learn her name, Sydney. Sydney was taken. And he's like, all right, listen, you've been in a mental hospital for 6 years. You've been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Like, story ain't adding up. And David's like, listen, I didn't make her up. And the guy's like, well, there's no records of her at all. Does this have to do with the incident? Because something happened to the patients, but it's not clear yet what is going on. And David's like, well, you got to ask my psychiatrist. And we get a scene of the two, of David and the psychiatrist talking, and they're talking about, how he's feeling, and it's kind of like, like, hey, you tried to hang yourself. How do you feel about that? And then we go back into the the office of David and the officer talking, and it's like, oh, let's talk about that. And he's basically talking about like, oh yeah, voices, not sleeping. We have a scene of the kitchen, David being in the kitchen and it's in shambles. We go back to the psychiatrist, and he's like, did the voices tell you, to hang yourself? And he's like, no, in fact, they told me to do the opposite. So the psychiatrist, I can't talk, is saying, when the police showed up, they didn't find any rope in the apartment. In fact, they only found rope burns around your neck. So it's like, again, it's like, what's going on here? There's so many interesting mysteries. And I'm like, all right, I was totally, within the first 10 minutes of the show, I was like, this is weird. This is different. I don't know what's going on. This is awesome. When people are complaining nowadays about like, oh, the MCU is so boring, like they don't do anything creative. It's like, technically this isn't part of the MCU. It's just like a Marvel-esque show. Well, technically, like Fox, it's a whole thing. But anyways, because this is kind of in the X-Men adjacent universe, it's a Marvel property, and like you watch this and you're like, oh, they really just let them cook on this show. Like, this is weird, this is different. I wish we had more things like this. But we go back to the show, and David is talking, or the officer is talking to David. We're back in that room. He's like, you believe you have powers? He's like, well, yeah, I do have powers, but when I take the pills, they like help calm them down. And then the officer's like, did you think you did all this with your powers? And this is where, I think David starts to act up, and the guy's like, listen, man, I'm just looking for the truth, all right? I don't want no problems, just like relax. And David's like, all right, everything's kind of fuzzy. So we get to a scene where David is sleeping. We're back in the psych ward. Sydney comes in. She lays next to him, obviously on top of the covers because she doesn't want to touch him. She's like, hey, I'm getting out tomorrow. They cleared me to leave. You know, you gotta get better and we can both get out of here. And David tries to kiss her, and obviously she's like, like, don't touch me. So it's a little awkward. The officer asks, like, hey, why couldn't you touch her? David's like, I don't know, it's a mental hospital. Like, can we just take a break? Like, all of these questions are, like, making me act up. He's like, all right, cool, let's take a 30-minute break. I'll be back, we'll get you some food. It's all good. We step outside, and we are in, like, this gymnasium with, like, a swimming pool. There are agents everywhere. It doesn't feel official. It feels like if local police force or something, or, like, SWAT or something, just, like, took over a school and then set up bases in there, right? So it's just weird of, like, what's going on here? Again, this show is all constantly setting up questions, and with all the cutting, it's like, where are we? What's the actual timeline? Is this true? Is this not true? Like, so much mystery, so much. But again, in a good way. So the officer goes to talk to one of the other agents, and the other guy is like, hey, that kid's twitchy. Turns out David's been off his meds for a week. He believes the powers are real, but he doesn't really understand them. He's the strongest mutant we've ever met. The other guy's like, listen, if you can't get him under control, Delta 1 wants him dead, whoever Delta 1 is. And the guy's like, well, that would be a waste, because, again, he's, like, the strongest person we've ever met. Like, you know, let me try to talk to him a little bit. And he's like, all right, cool, but, like, if things go south, we go to level 2. And it shows a dog in a cage, and there's, like, red light behind it. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? What does that even mean? We go back to David inside the room. The officer's partner is just straight up staring at him, not talking. And David's like, hey, man, can you, like, give me some space? Let me be myself. And he, like, you know, kind of gestures like, all right. And he puts down a little statue of a dog that he's, like, carved out of wood. It's like, what? We get a flashback at this scene of David yelling at his girlfriend in their apartment. He's freaking out by himself. The kitchen begins to shake. Everything explodes around him, and it's, like, flying past him. But then it kind of, like, slows down, and everything's, like, swirling around him. And he seems like he has control, but then he gets cut in the face, and then it's like, he doesn't have control. And then in the corner, you see this short, fat, yellow-eyed, demon-looking thing. And it's like, that's terrifying. And David snaps out of it. He's now standing up inside the room, facing the wall. And they're like, oh, did you eat? And he's like, what? Like, he doesn't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. They're like, all right, we're going to bring in this machine. We're going to check your vitals. And David's like, whoa, I want a lawyer. All right, you guys have been doing all of this stuff. And they're like, listen, you just need to relax. And David begins to freak out, and then everyone kind of, like, you know, halts real quick. And David steps near one of the little doctors, and they, like, back up, and he's like, oh, you guys are scared of me. And the officer's like, listen, we just want to know that you're not a danger to yourself or anyone else. And David's like, all right. He relaxes. They connected to the machine, and he's like, all right, cool, let's keep going with the story. Tell me about what happens next. So you see two people playing ping pong. Oh, you really see their hands. You don't really see who they are. We see Sydney waiting for David to come say goodbye, but he hasn't shown up. So it's kind of implying that David's playing ping pong rather than actually saying goodbye to Sydney. But it actually pans out. Turns out it's just two of the people in there playing ping pong, and Lenny's kind of watching. Lenny sees Sydney leaving, and she's like, hey, I've seen this really cool candy bar on the TV. If you can, you know, when you're out there, mail it to me and let me try it out. That would be pretty awesome. David runs in to say goodbye. He's really, you know, happy to see her. So happy he goes up and kisses her before she can stop him. We see, like, their lips touch. There's this big flash of light. There's this garden with a bunch of little small, like, little iPads, and they have David's memories inside of them. And we cut back, and there's, like, this, like, mental blast, and the two of them fall apart. David begins to immediately freak out, like the hardest he's ever freaked out. Like, he's scared. He's like, no, like, don't take her away. And Sydney's just kind of like, what the hell is going on? And they take Sydney out of the room. Everyone starts to crowd David. Everything starts to flash really red. You see the demon show up with the yellow eyes. And David, turns out, is in Sydney's body. So he's looking at his hand and everything, being like, what the fuck is going on? We go back to the room. The officer is like, wait, you woke up in her body? Like, what are you talking about? David starts to freak out again. You can see the pen next to the officer begin to shake. He's like, listen, man, calm down. I'm not bothering you. I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page. You guys switched bodies. I get it. Let's keep going. So we go to the psychiatrist who goes back to the main room after there's an explosion, or he like feels a rumble in the building. There's like the red light on that was flashing when David/Sydney was freaking out. Sydney joins, air quotes because it's David, and everyone is gone. But you can hear screaming in the background, so they're like, let's go check it out. So they go to check it out, and it turns out all the doors have disappeared. It's now just straight wall. So people are inside of the rooms with no way to get out, screaming like, please let me out, let me out, let me out. Because again, it's just straight wall now. It's like being trapped in a giant wall, essentially. And they're looking around. They find Lenny. She's been fused into the wall, straight up dead, like her lower half is inside the wall, her upper half is like hanging outside of the wall. She big dead. And you can hear Sydney inside David's body screaming like, David, let me out, let me out, let me out. And then we move on, and they let Sydney/David go, and the whole time he's like, I'm not Sydney, like this is like we switch bodies. And the psychiatrist is like, yo, chill out, just take your pills, like I gotta deal with all this, like have a good day or whatever. And a black car pulls up, a bunch of people pop out, and one of the people that pops out is the officer. And David's like, wait, hold on, weren't you in the car? And the officer's like, nah, that wasn't me in the car. And David's like, nah, your guys are messing with me. And he starts to freak out. The officer's like, hey man, calm down, let's just talk this out. And while he's doing that, this doesn't work. The pen flies and stabs him in the face, or in the cheek. David freaks out, sends everyone flying. The officers outside are like, go, 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 like go in. They're like, send in the gas. They gas him. David is out. We see some scenes of David as a child, and it sounds like his mom is talking how much she loves him, how great of a kid he is. We see Sydney, who is actually David, sit down at a cafe, and then randomly he turns back into his own body. Like it's not like they switched back, like they did a wipe, but essentially like he just turns back to his own body, and at the cafe. So he's out and about now. It is Halloween around this time. David goes up to this house. Turns out it's his sister's house. He's like, hey, can I stay for a couple days? Also, do you guys have waffles? So they watch him house down some waffles. He is not letting those things breathe. But it's kind of funny because it's like, oh, if you were unable to have, just the things you loved for whatever reason because you were locked away from having them, I'm sure, the moment you're able to have it again, you're probably like, oh my god, I knew all of it. But they let him stay. They give him a little bed in the basement. Lenny shows up. She's like, listen, man, I know I'm dead, but hey, better dead than to be in the ward just, popping pills every day and like not enjoying life. But she's like, hey, don't blame Sydney for what you did. Like, yeah, sure, she was in your body, but like yeah, if you give someone a bazooka, don't be surprised if they, blow something up. They don't know what they're doing. She's just basically kind of cool with being dead. And she's like, but they're going to come for you, right? Whoever wanted Sydney in the first place is also going to come for you now, because now, you and her switch, and they're going to come kill you. And David freaks out, and he telepathically throws the lamp against the wall, and he's like, oh, fuck. Sister comes out. She's like, what's going on? He's like, oh, sorry, I just dropped the lamp. She's like, oh yeah, it's cool, but you can see she's kind of like worried. And they have like gardening tools down there, so she's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna take these, just in case we use them tomorrow. Grabs all the stuff, runs upstairs. We see David sleeping now in his sister's bed, sister's house, inside the bed. And it is the people in the psych ward, and they are all, even David, and they're all doing like a dance number. And he keeps flashing to Sydney, and she's like, wake up. And they're still dancing. And she's like, wake up. And he wakes up. He is tied to a chair inside the pool. He is back with the officer and all the agents. And they're like, listen, if you make a move, we wired it so that we will send like a bunch of volts into your body. And, you're going to be hurt and or die. So, like, don't try anything funny. And David's like, this is all in my head. This isn't even real. And the guy's like, stop fucking around. Where is the girl? we wanted her, we got you, now we got you, we also want her too, so like, spill it. David's like, listen, I don't know where she is. I went to go look for her and I have no clue where she went at all. We get a flashback of David outside a phone booth, and he's calling the hospital. We see two people hop out of the building. There are two of the people that hopped out of the car earlier, and they're obviously going to grab him. The person on the other side of the phone's like, yo, there's no records of that person even being here. And he's like, what are you talking about? Before he can really get answers, he has to run away. He gets away. He manages to shake him. He's walking by, and he sees the back of someone's head. And then just like Voldemort, Sydney's face pops up on the back of the head. And she's like, don't stop moving. And he's like, what the fuck? And then she becomes her regular self. And they start walking next to each other. He's like, wait, hold on, like, did we actually switch bodies? Is that all in my head? And she's like, stop, this isn't real. This is actually a memory of the time they kidnapped you. I'm being projected into your mind. And then it keeps acting like a dream. Like sometimes the same dialogue will be said again, or they'll be back to like where they were walking. And she's like, listen, you're in a government facility. When you wake up, I need you to slide into the water. You'll see a big light. Don't worry about it until you see me, and then come out of the water. And then in the memory, David gets kidnapped. They hit him with a little needle, and he is out. So David wakes up for real inside the pool. The officer asks, like, oh, who are the people that showed up out of the car? And we get the memory again, but this time instead of the officer popping out is an older blonde-haired lady. And he's like, yeah, who are those people? And as he starts to ask the questions, David asks who the people are. He's like, who are you holding me captive? And the guy's like, we ask the questions around here. And as he's saying that, there's a bunch of like sparks happening all around the room. And it seems like he's starting to sweat. And David's like, oh, it's time. He slips into the water. There's this bright light. The soldiers are actually like incinerated like in a moment. David sees Sydney and the two people from the car. He hops out the water. She's like, all right, come on, let's go. Introduces the two other people. I forgot to write down their names. But they essentially go to make their escape. There's another guy outside. He has telekinesis. He is wrecking house. He's throwing rocks. He's throwing cars. He's throwing people miles away. He is leading the charge. Also, one of the girls, the one girl from earlier that came out the car that was kind of chasing David, is also there throwing hands, right? So they're making their escape. They get to the water. They're about to head on this boat. David's like, hold on. Is this real, okay? Or are you a female in my imagination? Am I still in the ward? Like, I just can't keep everything straight anymore. And she's like, listen, this is real. I came back. I love you. And he goes, all right, cool. And she's like, okay, say it back. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, I love you too. And this is where David meets Mrs. Bird, the older blonde lady. And she's like, all right, take my hand and we can get out of here. David looks behind him. He sees the demon in the corner. And he goes, all right. The demon disappears. He takes Mrs. Bird's hand. And that is the episode. We get the flash of Legion. And then we see the X-Men X in the O. And that's where the episode ends. All right. So if it's your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It's 1 and done. Give it a chance. And I'm in. For this one, I'm in. Like I said, if you're one of those people who... And I'm kind of like this too, where you're like, I just need more creativity out of the superhero space. Kind of like bored of the things that we're doing. Some things have been too like formulaic or just like uninspired for whatever reason. This is that show. Like this is weird. This has the feel like if I had to describe something similar to this, it's like that scene in Doctor Strange where I forget the main lady like hits him in the head and he's like flying around and seeing all that weird shit. It's like that kind of vibe, not visuals, but it's like that kind of vibe, but like in a show. And that's what Legion is. It's just like weird and wacky, and it's like, let's just get out there. What's real? What's not real? Who's doing what? Like, and the whole thing is again, David's thing is like, is he crazy? does he just have powers? Is it a little bit of both? And that's what makes the show really good, is that this feels like one of those projects, which I say, and you're gonna have to stick with me, of, and mainly in the animated space, of where it feels like the people at the top are like, yeah, sure, whatever, make your weird thing, we really don't care. And the people were actually allowed to make something really cool and dope. So yeah, I'm 100% in on this show. Again, if we just stick with this first episode, it's like, okay, there's two factions. David is an unreliable narrator. We never know what he thinks, or like where he actually is, or even with the scene of the people hopping out the car, it's like he thought one thing, it was the other thing. So it's never really clear what's going on, and I think that's what makes it the most interesting. And then you're adding superpowers on top of that. So it's like, okay, what can everyone else do? Do people really know what mutants are? Are they secret? Like, there's so many questions I could yap on. But then we also have Aubrey Plaza in the show, who is already awesome. But now that we have his, like, dead friend who's, like, stalking him, it's like, what's going on? Not to mention we keep having this demon pop up. And it's like, what is that about? So many threads to pull on. I think the show only ended up being like 3 seasons, maybe 4 tops. So it's really not that long, in and out, really. I think when I looked, it's like, first season was 8 episodes, second one was like 10 episodes, and the last one was like 8 episodes again. So it's really not that long of a show. But yeah, again, this show is just like rocking weird, and it's just awesome. I liked it so much that I'm like, I might actually go back and watch it again. So yeah, in the end, I'm going to give this one an I'm in. I haven't picked a show for whenever the next time I actually upload. But yeah, we'll see what happens. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at Little Leafers. And until next time, peace.